Welcome to the ACTNext podcast. This is the first one we've ever done. And today I have Brandon Dorman on the line. Brandon's going to talk about the CASE network and what CASE is about. It's the Competencies in Academic Standards Exchange. And I'll put some Brandon's links in this webpage that accompanies this. So I won't go into his whole resume and introduction, but welcome, Brandon.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Start with CASE. What is CASE and how does it work?
Yeah, so CASE is really an information specification. It's Competencies and Academic Standards Exchange. It's attempting to be kind of the base amount of information that we share about competency frameworks. Competencies being learning standards, maybe just regular standards in K-12, but really competencies is the vocabulary we're trying to use here. And it's a way to define what gets shared between systems and also what do we know about that particular learning standard at that particular time.
And so who uses it and how is it used?
Yeah, so it's a relatively recent specification put out by IMS Global, which is the educational organization that kind of says this is the information that can be shared between academic systems. So CASE is being adopted for use all across the ecosystem. It's already used in a couple different ways to store information about how a student is doing. So when we talk about a learning standard, we typically talk about state standards, right? And so thanks to the CASE network, we now have all 50 state standards in the CASE format. And so that can begin to be referenced by learning management systems. It can also talk about how students are doing as opposed to just saying, here's where a student, here's what they know. We can get very specific now with CASE as more and more learning frameworks get into the CASE specification.
Okay. And what were precursors to CASE or competitors?
Some precursors, there's a larger story, but essentially there have been common learning standard vocabularies before. There was one, ASN was an organization that was originally from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Eventually it was purchased by Desire to Learn, who runs the Brightspace learning management system. And it was doing fine, but it kind of was limited in terms of some of the way that it was making associations between standards. And it wasn't an industry-backed specification per se, which CASE is. So there's a schema.org is a collaboration of internet companies that says this is how data is represented on the internet. Schema.org doesn't have CASE per se, but it does have what they call learning object reference. And when we're talking about learning objects, we can now use the CASE URI or the CASE identifier as that learning object. And so it gives a much more kind of uniform way to describe learning competencies around the web. If we're talking about competitors, there are some proprietary, what we call learning object identifiers or competency identifiers by other companies that are out there. And whereas CASE is completely open, so when you're using a CASE identifier, you're going to know that that's something that's going to be open and accessible by anybody else that wants to use your product and reference your standard.
And you talk about the industry, and is that testing industry and or what are you talking about? Education?
Sure. I'm talking about education in general. So we can talk about education, or the education industry would be, the textbook publishers, the ed tech suppliers, the universities, the schools, anybody who's going to be interacting with this data, anybody who cares about this information is going to be someone that's going to be using or is using CASE in some way at some point in time, right? So it's a matter of getting more and more people using the CASE identifiers to be that standard way that standards are referenced. And so we're on the road to that. The CASE network is a big step forward. I'll talk about that in just a minute.
Okay.
But essentially, we have to have a way to refer to learning standards in a way that's reliable and a way that's open, and CASE does that, Bill.
And so then what was the need for CASE that it came to be about?
As open badges and other ways of, or micro-credentials are often called to, ways of representing learning for students is shifting from this model of kind of the monolithic 4-year degree to, as more and more people are getting kind of these micro-credentials and more kind of what they call bite-sized learning. And so we have to have a way to describe the learning that's taking place, right? To say, okay, so you take a course on an online, maybe a very short course on an online concept. And so it's like, okay, well, I can write my SQL query now, right? Okay, so let's write a competency for that. And let's go through and say, okay, here's an open badge and this person can do this particular skill. And so we take all the competencies together and we say, okay, this is part of this framework. And so that's kind of the need, is to be able to reference these skills in a way that other people understand. So it's not just me, at a university in California and I'm taking a course and I say, hey, I took this course, I took, Algebra 1. We want to make sure that that Algebra 1 has the same learning concepts as an Algebra 1 in Singapore or whatever it may be, right?
Okay.
So because CASE has this way of making equivalencies between standards, we call them association types. That's really kind of the fundamental use case here. Is what we can do is we can connect the different learning competencies within domains, within international, and of course, here in the States as well. But we can take equivalencies and say, okay, you learned this here, and then I can also say hypothetically, okay, in the workforce, this academic skill could translate to this skill over here. So it's kind of just this CASE itself doesn't do that, right? And that's going to be the content that's stored in CASE. But CASE provides a common means of exchanging data about these competencies.
Okay. And I was talking about Caliper, which is a different IMS global standard, and they said it was like ISO 9000. It's like a standard way across industry.
Yep, exactly.
Like beta versus VHS.
Yeah. I always talk about it. At the time last summer, I was moving, and as we were kind of talking about CASE and how the information flows and whatever, made me think a lot about like a door frame, right? You're building furniture, and if you are building furniture, one thing you have to think about is how big are door frames, right? Because you got to make sure people can get their couch inside their house, and so thankfully we have standards for that. We have a door is X by X or X by Y, right? We know how wide that's going to be. And so if you're going to build something that's bigger than that, it's not going to work very well. So same thing with this. If I'm building this amazing taxonomy of learning concepts, like for example, of course, ACT has the ACT Holistic Framework. It's this collection of math, academic and behavioral and cross-cutting and academic or career navigation domains. And so we have all this great information in this taxonomy. And we want to make sure that when we exchange that with our partners and with people that want to build assessments or build learning resources on our taxonomy, we want to be able to make sure that they can understand all the different context pieces about it. And that's, again, kind of what CASE provides. So, you have with CASE, you have what they call the competency framework item itself, but then you have all this metadata around it. So you have associations to other competencies. You can talk about if it precedes another statement. You also have, what kind of subject in it is it? What kind of item type is it? So I think of CASE as the way to say, no matter what learning standard you have, you're going to be able to make that, fit into your system. You know it's going to fit into your system, right? Just like the couch that fits to the door. What you do with it is up to you. But we've made CASE as easy to kind of understand as possible. There's all these different metadata fields, but really, what usually people care about, they care about simply like the full statement, maybe the human coding scheme, right? And that's all that we require you to put in is the full statement. But if you want to find out more, you can do that. So with Caliper, to get back to your question, Caliper is a way of measuring events that are happening on a question. And so Caliper would simply refer, if it even needs to the case identifier, saying, okay, I'm a kid taking a test, and it can tell me all the information about the question that I've taken. And then case is simply, it'll point back to case and say, hey, it's about this learning standard. Case is just, and most of the other IMS specifications, case is only used as a reference point to say, hey, this is the learning standard that's being assessed or being a resource on.
So Brandon, what is the CASE network and why is it important?
Yeah, the CASE network is a clearinghouse of CASE frameworks published by organizations such as states and assessment organizations like ACT. It's important because it's an industry-backed consortium. So it's an industry-backed place for CASE frameworks to be published. That's important because when we have this open, stable, referenceable place to have all of these CASE frameworks, edtech companies that are building software or building other products based on these standards can make it just work like plugging in a USB port, right? I've had hundreds of devices in my life and they all work with USB. We want that to be the same idea with standards, so that a student in Kansas City can look at their learning management system and they can see standards that are local to them, that are important to them, the same as a student in Fresno, California. Because right now, sure, it might work, but there's a lot more underground work that has to go on. And we want this to be as simple and as efficient as a system as possible. And the CASE network allows us to do that. Again, we can also be building products on top of these standards, such as open badges. We talked earlier in the podcast about Caliper, things like that. And so having this open, stable repository is a huge step forward for the learning ecosystem.
What's ACT's role? How is ACT involved in case?
Yeah, so Steve Polyak is a researcher at ACTNext, senior researcher, published information about machine readable standards around 2014, I believe, even. And that was before case existed. But Steve already kind of talked about how the metadata would enable for exchange and data visualization and this kind of stuff. So Steve and Adam Blum were on the kind of the case network or case task force, I should say, early days to actually define the metadata statements. Or the metadata that would define what information is exchanged in case, right?
Okay.
Which it's funny because I remember going to some of those early calls, and there would be a whole hour of discussion over something that sounds simple, but when you're talking about such the lowest kind of level here of information, it has far-reaching consequences, right?
Yeah.
So something even I'll just use for an example, CF item type, right? So thinking about a CF item type, you could have something like reporting category, you could have competency, you might want to call that a KSAO, just to help kind of define what this statement is. And there's a debate about, hey, should we set an item type, or should we say let the users define that? Because then you might have people using all kinds of item types. And in this case, we call it non-controlled vocabulary. So we said, yeah, let the users define that. We have suggestions on what those item types should be, but we wanted to let people choose what they want that item type to be to allow the specification to be flexible. So item type isn't really needed for the information exchange, but it is definitely something that's very, very valuable for systems to know what kind of item type it is, to be able to make recommendations on how that item is displayed, how it's used, and of course, what kinds of resources are tagged or aligned against it.
Okay.
ACT has been involved since the very beginning. I've been a co-chair on the case specification for the last almost year and a half, and ACT was a founding sponsor of the case network because, again, we feel like these open identifiers, or what they call them, open GUIDs, are a good thing for the industry, and so this is something that we want to support.
Open GUID?
Sorry, yeah, a GUID is the technical term for what they call like a long identifier, essentially. So there's like a long digit that says this is this exact standard, as opposed to just saying, this is my common core standard, K.cc.3 or something, right? It's like saying, okay, well, the Montana version of that standard has this long identifier. The California version of this standard has this long identifier. Now, it might even be the same text, but it's going to be able to take a much more nuanced approach and say, okay, exactly, this is the exact statement you're looking for.
Because of case, our question is, how can frameworks be used to improve learning outcomes because of case?
I mean, at ACT, we're very interested in this intersection of measurement and learning and career education navigation. And so, since the holistic framework is foundational to our transformation, what case frameworks can do is right now we're using it like kind of in a traditional sense, right? But we can, in terms of like a learning taxonomy. But what we can start to think about is how do we use these connections between frameworks as well to scale like the learning within our own organization? Right now, when you have a job, you have a set of things you're supposed to do, right? If we could start to use those and connect those within the organization in the case format across different organizations too, right? So what we could start to say is, okay, I have this competency. I can do certain things that aren't part of my main job. Maybe I can then use that if that was stored somewhere somehow. Someone could look up, okay, I need someone that can do a podcast, right? Okay, well, it's not Brennan's job, but it's a skill that he has listed and that he's demonstrated competent in. And so then you could then find me and do that. So when I think about frameworks, I don't like to think about kind of a narrow context. I like to think about the broader context. And the more that we're kind of systemizing information in a way that can be easily disseminated, I think is probably the best way I think about how we can use frameworks to improve learning. Because the more open we get with our learning statements, the more we can connect those with badges and with what they call CLR, which is like digital transcripts down the line, especially as we look at our learning products like ACT Academy. There's also, the RAD API. Things like this are all using case frameworks as their source of truth for the learning taxonomies. And again, cases gives a really clean way to know exactly what we're talking about and also what it might lead to. So.
And I asked you this yesterday, but maybe we can talk about it some more. The kind of thing should have happened or could have happened years ago, but it took this long for it to happen. What held it back? Why wasn't there a standard for this 15 years ago?
That's a really good point about why this hasn't happened before. I think that different industries or different companies within the industry thought that the way that they described standards was perhaps something that didn't need to be shared. So ACT really was leading the way when we published our holistic framework online at frameworks.ac.org in 2017, because I think that it didn't happen just because no one was really pushing for it to happen. And then with IMS Global really gaining a lot of ground, and educators really seeing that it doesn't make sense to have our data siloed. It doesn't make sense for a learning management system not to be able to talk to a gradebook, for example. That wouldn't be the case, but I'm just saying in terms of the general industry sense, like we're learning that it's better to compete on the substance of our content than our technical roadblocks.
Okay.
So that's one thing that we're really working on, and what CASE does again is just helps us provide that stable, common ground to share information about competencies to each other.
Good. Okay. The open salt role with CASE, you kind of talked about this. How open salt helps CASE happen.
Open salt was really just intended to be a proving ground for the CASE specification. It was a way to showcase the CASE structure, in terms of like the technical database structure or the way that it makes associations even, right? So we signed on a few months after they'd started it. PCG Education started it, and then AC joined with School City and some others around January 2017 in order to grow it, and then eventually it's actually become our internal and external way that we show competencies.
It's CASE is being used by Georgia and starting to be used by some other states.
Yeah, right now Georgia has a public CASE server at case.georgiastandards.org. Texas has a public CASE server.
Oh yeah.
South Carolina is using CASE internally with a contractor called LearningMate. We also have Smarter Balanced publishing all of their test specification information in CASE, and there's more. I mean, of course, the CASE network is a big step forward, where we're, the CASE network did the work to get those state standards from PDFs out here into the open in CASE. But I think that we're also getting there in terms of proliferation of the CASE specification. We have more and more vendors that are wanting to ingest standards in CASE so that they can use the open nature of it to really expand the possibilities of what learning objects are possible. So there's a specification of learning object or LTI resource search, which enables, now that we have CASE, and again we have that common identifier. So now if you have multiple learning object repositories, there was Novation purchased by ACT, but Novation has a repository of learning resources. OpenEd, which also was purchased by ACT in 2016, also has a learning object repository, so a bunch of learning resources, and you can now use the same standard identifier to search both repositories at the same time. Before, you had to do this like translation and human coding scheme, but make sure you're switching for a specific state, whatever, right? And now I can use that same identifier across anywhere else.
Right.
So if I'm using XYZ123, I'm getting resources tied to that learning standard. And if I see that also, like you said, maybe my caliper results or my open badge, I know exactly what's being referred to.
And do you foresee a time when it'll be in all 50 states, or kind of the universal standard?
Yeah, I think even if all 50 states aren't publishing natively, which is what we'd like them to do, we'd like them to say no more PDFs, right? Because the world is digital. And so for states to have a PDF document, that's fine. But I think you get so much more information, more context, more power, and even better for teachers and students, I think, if you are going to be publishing in CASE. Because, what you can do, there's an exemplar field in CASE. And so you could actually go through and say, hey, this is my standard. And then this is an example of what knowing this standard looks like. And so if more and more people are publishing in CASE and filling in all these fields, I think we get a better understanding of the true intent of the standards authors. And that's a better place for everybody. So why make a PDF that has to be extracted and recompiled and has, maybe if you make a change, you don't really know what change was made, right? If everything's stored digitally, when we upgrade new versions of standards or we incrementally update these things, we can create associations to actually know what was changed and what didn't change and how it changed, right? So there's a huge advantage to storing everything in CASE. And I think the more people start to see that, and again, with the CASE network, that's a huge step forward, the stronger we'll be. Okay.
And so that's kind of the possibilities of CASE and other interoperability standards. Do you want to talk about interoperability and why that's so important?
Yeah, interoperability in general, again, is the ability for systems in education or anywhere else really, right, to talk to each other. So again,
Yeah.
another example would be USB.
Oh,
If I have a USB
okay.
object and I plug it in anywhere, any USB port, it should work,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's a headphone, if it's my computer charging, right? And so think about with USB even, it used to be kind of the wider thing, and now like Apple has USB-C, which is a smaller one, which transfers data faster and it does different things. It's actually, the same USB-C cable can be what you plug into the wall to charge your whole computer,
Uh-huh.
or it can also be what you're using to hook up your CD player or something like that, right? And that's a standard, that's a specification as well. When we think about interoperability, we're really just trying to be invisible. When I think about even case, right? The whole point of case is that if you're a student anywhere and you are one of looking up learning resources or you're looking up an assessment item, you want to see your standard for where you're at. You don't care how it got there. You don't care where it's being hosted. You don't care if that item was originally written for that specific standard. If there's a crosswalk, of course, right? But that's the whole point. Interoperability means that technology is invisible and it should just work. And so that's really what we're going for here, whether it be Caliper, like you said, for strong assessment results, or QTI is a way that test item writers write questions and are able to be portable. Again, open badges, just in terms of if I'm learning something, I want to let other people know what I've learned. And so let's make that portable. It doesn't matter if you learn it at your local community college, even, right? This is maybe a wishful thinking use case, but if I learn something at community college and then I take a part of a course online at Udacity, and then I take part of another course, or the same course maybe, but expanded version, right? Maybe I go to some other online university.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I should be able to take all the things that I've learned, and I should be able to see that in a common place. And that's what the CLR specification aims to do, is provide kind of the student owning their information. Because right now, just again, in terms of interoperability, right, we think of like transcripts as what you've learned. But learning is much bigger than that, especially now. These interoperability standards are allowing us to exchange all the information of what we've learned and represent it in a stable, consistent format. So there's always a record of what we know. And that's kind of the bigger picture here.
Can you talk about Lily next week in San Diego, and you'll be with the case task force?
Mm-hmm.
And what's going to happen there?
Yeah, so the Learning Impact is the Learning Impact Leadership Institute. It's the big annual conference hosted by IMS Global. It's in San Diego, and there are a number of sessions put on by other people, but I'm involved just with anything related to case. So there's a bunch of sessions about states. We do have a blog post where I kind of collected some of those sessions.
Okay.
I'll be at the Case Network Task Force on Thursday, 1 to 5, where people that want to use the Case Network are going to be going through some of the issues that they're having with it, maybe ways to make it better, easier to onboard, talking about how Case Network does kind of expand upon kind of the basic case functionality as well a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
To say things like, hey, this is, like Georgia, for example, right, is an official verified standard, whereas others won't be that kind of gold nugget truth, right? Because they're actually hosting a case server and then just showing it over on the Case Network. Other folks, other states aren't ready to go there yet, but they're getting there. And so they're just going to be saying, okay, those are our standards, we approve of it, but they're not actually hosting the standards themselves. So all those kinds of things are going to be at the Case Network Task Force, and it's an open meeting, so we'd love to see you there.
Okay. And we're going to debut this podcast during San Diego.
Yep.
And again, our guest today was Brandon Dorman, and we were talking about Case and the Case Network. Thanks, Brandon, for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Our first ever.
Hey, we did it.
And you helped us get this going. I'll see you next week, San Diego.
Okay. Thanks, man. See you then.